Good. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining in again. So here on site and out there in cyberspace. So we have this week, we have two lectures in the ARIVE XR series given by our colleagues from Sydney, from the University of New South Wales. And we're very grateful for that. And I hand over to Tomasz, and he will probably give the first lecture. And are you giving the second one as well?
Yes. So we're doing two. So I'll be doing the first one, the second one as well with Conan, who's with me here.
Very good. So I hand over to you. The stage is yours, Tomasz.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for joining this talk. So this is, as you know, the ARIVE series of lectures on AR, VR, and different techniques that are very important and very close to our hearts. So we are from Sydney. I'm the director of Epicenter at UNSW here. So we're going to show you a bit of stuff around what Epicenter is all about. And I'm as well team leader in visual analytics and CSIRO Data 61. And Conan, who is sitting next to me, he is lead health software engineer, and he will be talking today as well about high-end visualization system, which is one of the main topics of this presentation today. So on Thursday, I think we have another one where we try to focus on showing you some demos how to run HEPS as well, and gives you an overview about some of our recent projects in digital twins. So if you're interested in digital twins, especially come on Thursday as well. Let me see whether I can switch slides. Yes. So if you go to this website, you can go to our small website, which is not very well updated yet, showing like the team and showing what Epicenter is all about. And Epicenter as well is part of the ARIVE network. That's why we're giving this lecture series, and we are connected with the larger community in Australia and New Zealand. So this is the team in Epicenter. That photo was actually taken at the end of last year with a couple of changes among the team. And team always grows or shrinks, so depending on the situations we have at the university and so on. So our mission is to solve complex problems using visualization, computer graphics, and model computational platforms, especially computer graphics, because we treat computer graphics as a kind of fundamental of building anything we do with visualization, and visualization as well deployed on many different systems that you're gonna see in a second as well in the slides. We as well deliver interdisciplinary tools. So we are connected across different faculties at UNSW University, but as well externally. So I always say we cover art, science, design, and engineering. And as well, we're building here in Sydney community of practice, we're connecting visualization, AI, modeling, and simulation. So some of the projects you're gonna see today, and especially on Thursday, they show you cross connections of all these fields all together. And basically, like if we're talking about visualization, we're talking about computing and intelligence. So I was always saying, if you can draw a pixel, you can actually build anything you would like to build. So you can have like represent images by the numbers, and only if you actually have some kind of like proper field of view on those numbers and represent those numbers by, let's say, grayscale, you can see some patterns in the data. That's how we're actually coming to a fundamental block of what visualization is all about as well. And the future is now. So having this kind of capabilities when we can start putting pixels on the screen, we can start building, mixed reality systems that present holograms in three-dimensional universe and visualize and connect to the computational part, but also visual parts and human cognition and stuff that you've already heard as a part of this lecture series as well. So currently we are transitioning into augmented age. So, you're gonna see more and more kind of augmentations happening everywhere, especially VR, and transitions into AR is becoming kind of like usual business as usual, I would say, with the cheapest hardware coming on the market slowly, step by step, we'll be able to connect to like more computational systems. And those systems are basically designed to make our life much easier and better. Of course. And Epicenter itself connects visualization, simulations, and AI. And we're going to show you like types of systems we have and how we actually cope with those and how you run on big infrastructure like Epicenter, very different types of projects. And to start off, I wanted to actually talk about human in the loop, which is actually us in center, where visual analytics is a science of analytical reasoning, which is facilitated by interactive visual interfaces. So if you're doing any kind of visualizations, you have some input raw data coming in, and you're building some analytical tools in here. And then visualization helps you to actually see the numbers. As I showed you with the numbers, seeing like some monument before, then you can see some patterns in the data. And you're building the models that helps you to actually build a decision making kind of paradigm when you're building the knowledge, and the knowledge is built by interchanging analytics and visualizations by user interactions of human in the loop interactive to improve the analytical outcomes. So visual analytics is multidisciplinary subject, as you very well know. So it can be used for modeling, information visualization, knowledge science, and human cognition. So connecting all of those together. And of course, you've heard perhaps like a talk by Monash University. So immersive analytics is one of the latest kind of goodies that you can do in mixed reality systems, when you can actually overlay visual analytics with immersive systems, so you can have even more kind of applications developed for building this knowledge for better decision making. And now we're jumping into Epicenter. So I wanted to tell you a few words about what we are. So we are located in Sydney at UNSW, and you are in one very special building here in Paddington campus. So this is cross sections of our building. It's a bit outdated rendering, so we have to actually update this image in the very near future, but it shows you that we have a couple of different systems. So in particular, we have 5 different labs that I will talk about on the next slide, but wanted to basically highlight some of the ideas and areas we investigate and use inside the Epicenter, so such as visual analytics, HPV, high performance visualization, connecting simulations with visualization, AR, VR, and as well a bit of HCI research, and lots of stuff going to digital interaction design. And our center is located as well in art and design faculty, so we do collaborate with artists and do a bit of as well media arts and try to use immersive environments for art installations. And of course, this is fundamental for this group of people that we have perhaps today at this lecture, so I don't need to repeat that, but the reason I'm showing this plot that some of the projects that we're going to be presenting during these 2 lectures are actually touching on all this Milgram reality virtuality continuum. So some of them will be like real environment in a way. So I'm going to show you some photographs from our systems and augmented reality examples, augmented virtuality and virtual environments built completely using computer graphics pipelines. Okay, so we're going to start with showing you a bit of stuff about our systems. So we have 5 different labs, as I mentioned before. EXA lab, which is lab that has 3-meter hemispherical dome. It has as well a bunch of different VR and AR devices. It has as well like EEG, lip motion, 3D mice, and some additional sensors that you can attach to your bodies, or you can measure your heart rate and stuff like that. So we expose those sensors as IoT devices, and you can monitor different aspects and different feelings as you go with being inside the visualization, for instance. We have computer graphics lab, which is 160-degree cylindrical screen, and it's driven using 2 projectors. It has as well like motion tracking camera, so it can be used for basic motion tracking or connecting motion tracking with AI systems, for instance, for doing some additional evaluations and stuff like that. And we have digital twins lab, which has motion walking platform, so it's called OmniVR, and it uses VR traditional system for visualizing data. Our core system is called EpiCylinder. So it is 340-degree cylindrical screen, which is built with 56 HD projectors, and I'm going to show you a photograph of the system in a second. And it has as well infrared tracking system, and it has ambitioning sound system, so you can visualize data not only in 3D, but as well using audio. So not only visually, but as well, using audio system. So currently the system is almost 120 million pixels in 3D, which is perhaps one of the highest resolution VR systems in the world. but for sure is the highest resolution cylindrical screen in the world. I don't know any other system that is better than that currently on the market. We have as well like hemispherical dome, which is the photographs you're seeing in here. What you can do with that is you can, for instance, analyze graph networks, like as you can see in here on the photograph, but as well you could visualize the animations to explain very complex sciences to more general audiences. So it's built to be actually traveling. So at one day when we're gonna run our ARIVE conference, we can move it to Auckland, for instance, or we can move it to Melbourne or wherever the conference will be, and we'll be able to show you how our systems and our demonstrations will work. And we can do some competitions with the whole community, so you can visualize your projects as well on the system. So this is inside the epicylinder. So as I mentioned, we have 56 different projectors. So you can see on this image, there's projector sitting inside, and it has sets of different mirrors and different electronics calibrating the screen to be shooting directly into the front panel and making sure the adjustments of the colors as well like equally spread across the screens as possible. You're seeing when the screens are on, seeing different elements of the screen. We have almost no bezels, unlike, for instance, Cave 2. We have motion tracking system, so using the Vicon motion tracking system, which is sitting just below the ceiling. And we have 16 speakers mounted just below the ceiling and 16 speakers mounted in the floor to simulate three-dimensional sound system. And of course, we have like supercomputer, which is located downstairs. So we have one CPU cluster, one GPU cluster, and we slowly building as well ML or AI cluster system, allowing us to enhance some of our capabilities as well in that space as well. And now I'm going to show you a couple of different projects. So this particular one is a project that looks at the genomics, and this is genomics viewer that allows us to visualize a big data. And big data is coming, for instance, from the DNA unfolding or sequencing of the data coming from for instance, from the human cancer cells. And this is exactly what it is showing. But I wanted to show you basically how we use this kind of visualization system as the microscope on the data, because you cannot replicate the same functionality on VR because simply you don't have enough pixels to visualize. Again, it's 120 million pixels in 3D. So when we pack all the data, we can visualize all the chromosome maps. So as you can see on every single line, there's a chromosome map. And basically we can interact using joystick or game controller. So you can select different point and zoom in into the visualization. So if we go like that, you can actually use it as a system that enables you to go inside forever into very large data sets. Then of course, like what we can utilize the Cave system is when you switch off 3D, you can map as well like HoloLens mapping into the whole system. And then you can use HoloLens and gaze and gestures and voice commands to operate the whole visualization. So you can see Dominic who is actually looking using his gaze and gestures to interact with the whole data sets that are being displayed on the screen. And of course, on the big data, because data is huge, you can have some kind of search engine that allows you to very quickly to jump to a particular point in the huge data set. What we like about Cave system especially is that enables you to do collaborative research out of the box. So 3 of us having glasses can go into the system and talk about particular area of science or analyze data or basically enjoy the same experience at the same time, not simulating, ourselves using avatars as it would be in traditional like VR systems, for instance. So that's very, very powerful. And as well, it has very special implications for some of the newest projects that we're trying to get funding for instance, in curing PTSD, for instance, where the sessions that you run with your psychologist and psychiatrist will be in the same space and not in VR, just basically like in the Cave system when you can physically see a person, but as well be immersed at the same time in virtual environments. So very, very powerful. Next example of the projects that we do in here is the project that was developed in collaborations with CSIRO Data 61. So it's massive networks visualization. And it's particularly very special for us because that's another type of big data. And it uses very special formatting and use GLTF formats to stream the data directly to GPU memory. And the task was really to be able to visualize up to 1 billion nodes, possibly in real time when we can do interactions with the data sets. So basically, before I show you the animations, I wanted to tell you the data set is coming from the Yelp system. So that's, like open data that you can get from online. We did that because we are not able to demonstrate, like some confidential data that this project was designed for. And Yelp is basically businesses and users. So businesses are depicted by the red dots and users by blue dots. So if the user review the business, then you can draw a line between them. So you create the network. And then using different layouting algorithms, you are able to recreate different layouts. So for instance, in this particular case, we're looking at the force space approach when the whole system generates a layout which is kind of artificial, but it gives you, like a feeling about different clusters created automatically by the network that you're trying to analyze. And then, the whole code allows, or the app allows you to select different points or different nodes, I would say, and see the cross connectivity with other nodes. So you can actually, by doing participatory exploration, you can tell the story about the data as you go. So you can as well do different level of details. So you can go to one kind of cluster can be collapsed into one point, for instance. Especially when you have big data sets there, you're seeing, like huge amount of points, not necessarily any patterns in the data, but having this kind of capability enables you to do that. Then, of course, you have like different layouting systems. So depending on the use case, you can go to layout like that, or you can basically, geolocate all the points on the map of the world. And that gives you another layer what's possible in terms of analysis. And of course, it depends on your use case, how you want to analyze the networks. We are also like very big geeks, I would say, on low-level computer graphics. And for that reasons, we like to play with fragment shaders. Perhaps like everybody or most of the people would be familiar with fragment shaders, at least those who are doing very low-level computer graphics. But basically, it's a technique where you can imagine having this kind of screen and shooting ray, virtual array, to every single pixel on the screen and looking for the cross sections with the ray with a mathematical function. And if you find that cross section, then you can draw a pixel value that represents some color based on some, like mathematical processing, again, of physics and so on. In this particular case, we are able to use like very simple wavelets to simulate the movement of ocean. And it runs, of course, in real time. And I would say this is perhaps the highest resolution fragment shader in the world. If you want to see some of the examples of fragment shaders, I strongly recommend you a website called Shader Toy. And maybe some of you already know Shader Toy, which is sets of different shaders that you can learn how to code using GLSL. And another example is using ultra high resolution screen to visualize fractals. So again, this is using the same techniques like the ocean you've seen in the last slide, which is allowing you to fly through the fractal equation in real time. And it looks absolutely spectacular. So you're very welcome to visit us in Epicenter when you're visiting Sydney, when we can travel again, so we can show you that face to face. And of course, because the system can be used for ultra high resolution maps and some of the outcomes of digital twins research we do in Epicenter and as well with Data 61, I'm going to show you the next presentation on Thursday. This is an example of high performance visualization on the map of Sydney, when you can actually explore different elements of the maps. And of course, you can overlay the data with different elements that I'm going to show you extension of that on Thursday as well. But I think this is perhaps my last slide showing the systems we have in Epicenter as an intro to what we have in Epicenter, what kind of intro projects we do. And this is the last one, which is showing us lying under the hemispherical dome. and basically like visualizing animations to explain, or using storytelling and narrations to explain complex sciences, for instance, to more general audiences. And it's actually attracting lots of attentions as well from different communities that are coming and watching animations in our space. So the next one, what I wanted to do is to give voice to Conan. So Conan will be talking about, I showed you like the scale of different systems we have in Epicenter, but the reason we're doing this talk is as well showing you how you can use a system, we call it high-end visualization system, to develop stuff on one PC, but deploy it on any kind of systems you can imagine. So Conan, I think over to you, you can explain exactly how that works and how it can be done. And we're gonna do some examples and show off on Thursday as well. So we do like direct screen share with Unity and show you how you can use the system yourself.
Yeah. So, hey everyone, my name's Conan. As Tomasz mentioned, I'm a software engineer here. I'm the lead for the HEVS project. And the HEVS project is sort of our attempt to simplify how we can make use of all our crazy systems that we have here, but also facilitate the ability to share our projects with other labs that have various systems as well that might not be identical to what we have, but through HEVS, we can ensure that our applications will work on their systems and their applications can work on our systems. And we're working on a few different extensions as well to it to allow us to work more collaboratively and create sort of projects where we can actually explore data together, but also the ability to manage offsite facilities. So with HEVS, split into a few different sections at the moment, but the main goal is for us to be able to create applications that not only allow us to do sort of immersive analytics, but also sort of artistic displays, other sort of data science work, different visualization techniques. We don't really want to be limited to one set of things that we can do with HEVS. So HEVS is fairly open-ended at the moment and ongoing with its development. At its core, it allows us to work with sort of multimodal display types, so all the different things we have here, but also allows us to work with clusters and even VR and tablet sort of systems. And we're even doing some experiments at the moment where we can set up sort of mini clusters using Raspberry Pis, which would be pretty cool once it's all working. We also then sort of have an interaction layer to it because we want the ability to, no matter what sort of input devices you have, that the same project will at least still run. You just interact with it in a slightly different way. But the goal would be that you don't have to recompile your project or change anything about your application. It should just work on another system. So I'll go through a little bit about what we have as well. So with the system being multimodal, as in the display types and interaction that it works with. So our system works on domes, clustered displays, cave displays, touch walls, lots of different tablet setups we've tried out. We have a little mini cave that's running off some Surface Go's, which is kind of cool. Some people, you might have seen that last year at, what was the conference name again? Where we had the mini cave? VRChi, that's the one, sorry.
That was in Brisbane before SIGGRAPH Asia.
Yes, and some of you might have seen sort of an early presentation on HEVS at SIGGRAPH Asia. So anyway, back to it. So with HEVS, we can run it on all these different systems and with all the different input devices. At the moment, we have an iteration of HEVS that works with Unity. We're running it in Unity 2019 at the moment, but we have also experimented with some sort of lower level C++ implementations that use OpenGL and Vulkan. Those are sort of still work in progress. I'm finding most people at other locations are using Unity, so that's been our focus for the moment. But there's potential as well for us to create sort of a Python wrapper for people who are more interested in that sort of setup. We don't really want to limit it to one thing. We definitely want HEVS to be able to run however you want to run it, using whatever language you want to use, but it all depends on support. So where we're at the moment is Unity 2019 is sort of our main focus. It does run on Windows, Linux, even OS X, Android as well. So you can run your own sort of clusters with whatever setup you're using. Some labs that we've talked with who are using HEVS use sort of Linux primarily, so we want to make sure that we work with that. Here, we're mostly Windows 10 and Windows 7 still, so that's been our focus, but it does work everywhere, which is cool. So I think I've already mentioned some of this stuff, so I could probably go through this one a little bit quicker. The main aims of HEVS is to simplify deployment and sort of implementation of projects. I come from sort of a game development background, like a professional background, where you create a game to run on lots of different consoles. And one thing I found when I joined Epicenter here is that lots of different labs have equipment similar to us, but what they do is they keep creating very specific projects for each different platform, or they have to manually recompile it for another device when the other device is sort of the same thing. Like you might have a dome running Windows and a cluster running Windows, but you're still having to compile different applications when you could just have one application that just reconfigures itself depending on what display screen you have. So my goal with HEVS was to create something where you don't have to think too much about what you're creating for your application, that you can just create your application and that it should work at these different locations. Which I find I'm repeating myself a bit, but that's really the goal of HEVS, to simplify the process of creating these applications so that you can focus on data exploration rather than creating something to display on a cave.
That's also perhaps you should mention too about artists coming into the play, where you don't want to, artists, they want to actually do stuff straight out of the box rather than learning like how to build very simple visualization pipelines.
Yeah, I'm finding a lot of universities are using Unity for their courses, for non-programmers. So you want to make it as simple as possible so that you could have artists creating an installation somewhere. HEVS does support different projector-based systems, so you could potentially have, here in Sydney, we have sort of the, why am I having a mental blank of the name of the light festival that we have here in Sydney? I can't remember the name of it. If anyone does, please post it. But they use projectors. Vivid Festival, that's the one. You could have artists then use HEVS quite easily to post, post stuff to all these different systems without them having to learn complex setups. They can just create something nice and simple in Unity, and it would work on these, projecting it onto the Opera House, but they can test it out in their own little setups, which is kind of cool. So going through a bit more into the particulars, HEVS really is controlled mostly by a configuration file. It is what describes your systems, your installations, your facility, your site. We've got different sort of ideas of, you could have a site that then has lots of installations like we do here, and you can have a configuration file that specifies how HEVS is supposed to act on each of these platforms, so that you can create the single executable, run HEVS, and it will reconfigure its scene to work on that system. It's very much that idea of trying to be build once, run everywhere, but everyone knows that that's like a pipe dream. It will never actually work that way. So there are some slight exceptions, but for us here, we've found that we can create one executable and it will run on our dome, on our cluster, on our 160-degree screen, and also runs in VR as well from the exact same executable, which is kind of cool for us anyway. With the different displays that we support, we do support a lot. We are trying to extend it, so if you have some sort of funky display type, it wouldn't take us long to be able to support that. At the moment, we support things like standard desktop displays, but also then immersive displays, what you're familiar with Cave, where things are kind of based on user perspectives or certain perspectives. But then we also support different projection-based systems. So we do have the ability to do warp and blend, but at the same time, it also works with third-party warp and blend systems that you might be using. So HEVS does work with Immersive View, Bioso, but we do have our own sort of work in progress tool where you can create your own warp and blends, and HEVS will work that way. can work with curve-based screens, can work with hemispherical domes, and you don't have to change anything about your project. You just specify in the configuration file that, hey, I'm using a dome that's 6 meters across and it's up in the air, or it's 2 meters across in front of you, or you're on a curved projector screen. It's just the configuration file, and the application, when you build it, will just run on those systems.
I guess perhaps we should say, if you have any weird systems that you wanted to deploy some of the visualization using HEVs, very happy to work with you. But like, we wanted the community to use it, and I'm trying to give it away for the community as well, in a way that we can, I mean, the idea is, if you use the same system that replaces the camera rigs that Conan perhaps will talk about in a second, but the whole idea is to build the community of practice when we can exchange the projects. So all the demos in ARIVE, perhaps we have, like we have a couple of groups in ARIVE, and we can exchange the projects we do across the board. So all the demos can run on all the systems. That's in theory possible.
I mean, that's our goal. That's why we're creating HEVs. So with the immersive displays, I mentioned it, but people mostly already know what immersive displays are. We're talking about things like Cave, where the implementation of the screens are kind of based on a perspective. They're not your standard sort of looking down the Z-axis. It's very much offset, which is why I usually call it off-axis displays. We support mono and stereo with those as well. You can have it head tracked. So you can have an application that works just straight off the multi-user. For example, it's what we do in the cylinder. You can have 10 to 20 people standing in there, and the 3D perspective will look correct for them. But you can also at runtime just toggle it over to a single user. So now it's tracked off their perspective. And that's another thing with HEVs, is that we want to have the ability to toggle these things at runtime. And we have used sort of third-party tools that do a lot of similar stuff in the past, things that take care of our clustering that will work in our Cave. But what we found is with those sort of libraries, we would have to create a completely different application to make it work on a dome, which is why we went down our own path and created HEVs, so that we don't have to keep creating custom things. It'll just work. But yeah, you can toggle this stuff for your immersive displays. So you can do stereo, mono, and I'll talk about stereo a bit more in a moment. With projection-based displays, we can deal with multi-projector setups. Our dome, for example, is 8 projectors overlapping to create a 4K resolution. So it supports that out of the box, but you can also get away with just doing a single fisheye projector, maybe a couple of projectors. With the warp tool we have, you can create your own sort of calibrations to fit on your, say if you had something like an iDome, for example. But it also can read Immersive View and Vioso config files if you're using one of those sort of systems already, which is kind of cool. So that way you can just use that one system to create your warped desktop, for example, and HEVs will function correctly with that, which is useful. You can not only just project onto sort of curved screens or a dome, you can use HEVs to then have sort of multiple projectors to create sort of an immersive projection space, maybe an art installation, like Vivid Festival, where you project onto buildings, because you can create masks with the blend tools so that you can mask out things and it will look kind of cool. We haven't used it for any of those sort of setups ourselves, but we could, especially since we're located at an art campus. That would be one way we can engage with the faculty a little bit more here. But we already engage with a lot of faculty, so it's probably a bit too much extra work for us. So yeah, that's what we can do with projection-based displays. We also support touch displays, but when it comes to the touch display itself, the display is not really anything fancy. It's more just the way that the touch works. With HEVs, we have TUIO integrated into it as well, so you can receive touch inputs from lots of different devices. You could have multiple touch panels together, and they will actually act as a single large touchscreen. And where that becomes useful is that we can create an application that would work on a tablet really well, and that will scale perfectly onto a large multi-screen touch display, where the touch will just work really, really nicely. But at the same time, you can have this touch source is coming from other devices. So we've got applications where we use tablets in the cylinder, where you can just interact with the tablet. And it's not that we had to create two different applications to interface and do particular behaviors. You can create the one application that uses touch to say rotate around, and that same application can then just use a config file to say that the source for the touch comes from somewhere else, and you can just have a little broadcaster sending out touch positions. So it kind of simplifies how much work we need to do to make touch work on large displays. With stereo, I mean, it's common that most different systems like this support stereo. So we support stereo. For example, we use quad buffered stereo down in the cylinder, but then we use different techniques. So we use side-by-side and top-bottom for our other systems. But we also have anaglyphs if you want to use sort of red, green, red, blue, red, cyan, stuff like that, which is useful for debugging on sort of your own display anyway. You can change them runtime, like I mentioned. Yeah, the stereo works really well. So it's there if you need it. But the main thing for us that really helped our projects was the fact that we have clustering built in to all this. So what it means is we can create an application that will just run on a standard desktop, but if you want that to run in a cluster, you don't have to do anything except make sure your configuration file specifies where the nodes are, which is the master, things like that. And now your application will just scale up and run. In our case, our cluster is 29 nodes. You might have a cluster that's smaller, you might have a cluster that's larger. We support different types of frame sync, and there's different sort of ways of communicating between the nodes. So you can have the master trigger events on the clients, or the client can make calls back on the master. So everything you would expect of sort of a clustering system is there. With using things like Unity, we then also tie into their timing and animation and particle system. So if you're just creating sort of art installations, those sort of things will be synced, which is good. But it also controls behaviors like spawning and creation of objects, so that you don't have to do anything really fancy to make it work. You just create the object on the master, and it will be created on the clients as well. You can have synchronization where things that are controlled by the master will be, behave properly then on the clients. But at the same time, with HEVs, you can create systems that are either deterministic or non-deterministic. They work perfectly fine. You don't have to have everything controlled by the master. You can have then other systems where every client behaves individually. So you could have a data set or a simulation you're running where you actually want each client to display different things and run different things, but they're still all kind of communicating with each other. So that's perfectly possible as well. How much time do I have? Oh yeah, a bit more time, still okay. With interaction, like I mentioned, we try and make sure that no matter what sort of interaction device you have, they work. We've set up systems so that if you're used to having a pointer in your cave, the pointer is mapped also to a mouse if you wanted to use it on a desktop, or it can be. It's completely up to you if you map things that way, so that you can create an application where you can interact on the desktop, but at the same time, take it to a cave and it will work as well without you having to create custom code to handle pointers. Touch, like I mentioned, is already sent around as well, but you can also make use of voice commands and gestures. We've been doing that lately, where in the cylinder, we can now use voice commands to create objects, spawn objects. And that module is sort of an additional layer that we're gonna sort of have available for HEVs as well. We've got open sound control in there, VRPN as well. So you can have tracked items coming from XR systems. So maybe you've got sort of a couple of Vive trackers tracking things. They can be broadcast to your cluster so that you can use the VR tracking if that's what you have. Or you can, if you're in VR, same thing. You don't have to create custom code. The objects will behave the same. But you can also use other tracking systems. We have a Vicon tracking system in the cylinder, and we have an OptiTrack system for our 160-degree screen. So it will work with all that, and the actual application itself doesn't care where any of that source data comes from. It just goes, cool, I have an object that's tracked. And the config controls the rest of it. With these sort of additional layers, like I mentioned, the voice command stuff, we do have some additional components to HEVs. They're not really part of the core. You can think of them more as like optional add-ons that you can add to an application you're building, or they're sort of extra tools that we have. One would be some facilities that we have deployed HEVs to in the past, they don't actually have their own way of executing applications on their cluster. So we do have just some simple tools we've included that allow you to be able to launch things in a cluster if you need. Distribute data as well. It's better than some places I've been to where they just have like little scripts they have to keep typing into to broadcast data around. This way, it's just a web interface where you can select your folders and your paths and send stuff across. We also do have this little tool that we've added into HEVs. Basically, we have a lot, maybe similar labs to us will have this problem where you have a lot of people coming through to do tours to see all your fancy stuff. Maybe the faculty people want to show off the fancy equipment that they have. So a lot of our time gets taken up to running these tours. So we have also included the ability in HEVs that you can record all the input and events that are happening in a session, and you can play it back. And then you can also add extra annotations or sort of voice overview and narration and edit it if you need, so that you can just play back a sort of a session that you've created live and then just keep playing that as your demo rather than having to be there. But at the same time, you can, if you're there, just hit pause on it or stop and just take over control. So it's just sort of a little playback system that we included. Collaboration is sort of a big thing we're trying to get into a lot more of now. So we're creating a lot of our applications where you can collaborate on the same thing. We're kind of trying to polish off a module that we can include with HEVs that's more generic, that could work in lots of different applications rather than having specific implementations for each of our projects. But at the same time, we have this session manager that can sort of broadcast a session that's happening so that other people can join in. We are looking into setting up more sort of plot and data visualization tools. We do a lot of that ourselves. A lot of you do as well. So it's more just trying to come up with a set of tools or perhaps partnerships or something. We haven't 100% got that finalized yet to make it so that people can create these visualizations easily that would work in a cluster and things like that. We are including some compute capabilities that are more just exposing API calls to things like TensorFlow so that you can have an application sort of run a whole bunch of different compute, get back answers and results and display it. So it's just sort of opening that up so that other people don't have to do it themselves. And then a couple other little bits that I'll just talk about because we have some slides for that. I did mention the sort of the launcher portal we have. It's web-based, but you run it locally, so you can have it on your own phone and you can just launch on your phone, like different applications on your platforms. For example, at EPFL over in Switzerland, all of their different installations are in the same room. So we were able to just kind of like stand there and just launch on their cylinder, on their dome, on their wall, just straight from a tablet, just nice and simply. Although this does look fairly rudimentary at the moment, it's just that way at the moment. It's going to look better, but it works, so it's kind of cool.
We need to finish.
You need to finish it? Cool. I'm only like 2 slides, but I can finish up in a moment. I'll blitz through this because I am kind of ranting. I get that. Site Manager is just kind of tied in with the portal stuff. You can actually have all your installations be kind of register themselves online with the HEVs library that we've set up, where you can create your own accounts and log in. And what it means is that you could perhaps be working with another group that have a site and you're able to deploy applications directly to their site without having to be there. And you can even run the applications. We, for example, could be partnering with some local councils to create sort of installations. And this would allow us to just quite easily run the installations at their locations without us having to go there and change something on a PC.
Or having installations on all the ARIVE nodes and run it at the same time when we do lecture and time.
All that.
Yeah.
The session manager, I mentioned that. It was just tied with the collaboration where you can run an application and it will register that it's ready for other people to join in. It's very much like a video games, or like a multiplayer video game lobby where people can jump on in. And the HEBS library is sort of just it's a site where you're able to upload data sets that you can access from different HEBS applications, but you can also share entire projects that you've created that another site could download and run that project tied into that site manager stuff. Use cases for the libraries, like if you create a data set that you want to deploy on all your different systems, you don't have to copy it around everywhere. You can just upload it to the one spot and all of them can access it. Or if you're working with some researchers who have created a data set, they can upload the data set and you can view it. You don't have to recompile your application and include the new data set. It's just loading up the file. I mean, everyone's done that before. But it also allows you some interesting interactions. We do have a system where we can be running it in our cylinder, and on a mobile phone, you can grab the data set or update the data set and push it to the cylinder. So the cylinder can just run it. And that type of thing, it's not particular to that application. It can be implemented into any application. Yeah. So it sort of just ties up a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, so I guess that's
I've kind of ranted a little bit. I'm going to slide over now.
No, just come in. I guess what we're gonna do is like a bit of Q&A, I guess.
Yes.
So I hope it was useful. It was like lots of technical stuff, but as you can see, what we're trying to do with the HEBS is there are a couple of existing, systems like the Till 3D that is extremely expensive for academics to have. So trying to make sure we actually put a bit of love in our system that we can share with community, and we believe our system is already better than some of the commercial solutions. And especially we could adjust whatever we need very fast and work with you to make it better as we go. So do we have any questions?
Thank you very much, guys. Very nice. Yeah, I think it's very impressive stuff. Lots of technology in it, and if I just look at the engineering of it, there's a lot of work in it. Right? I would start off with a question, and it's probably more a question for Conan. For your multi-user cave installation, right? You said you can, let's say, track 10 users, and so I think what you're doing is probably you're showing, each one a different view from your, let's say, your cylinder. So how do you solve the conflict if people look at the same space? And do you time multiplex then the stereo views, or do you determine whether they are closer together and so they get the same view, like an over-the-shoulder view, or how do you resolve the multi-user conflict in cave systems? So that's probably the question.
With the multi-user, it really comes down to because of the way our screens are set up. It very much is all the way around you. Every single screen has its own frustum pair, and for sort of a multi-user experience, you just treat it as if there's a single user at the center of the cylinder, and for every single screen, it has its own pair as if it's orientated towards that screen. And the end result ends up being not a perfect stereo representation for everyone standing around. However, it is close enough that you have this sense of your own stereo. Like, I haven't done any research into this type of things as an engineer rather than a researcher, but we have a couple of our applications are just static stereo images around you. And as you walk around in the cylinder, you almost get the sense that you can see behind things, even though it is just a static image. It's the fact that every single screen is having sort of its own stereo pair, which that probably doesn't really explain it enough.
Perhaps I go one step back, perhaps. So are you rendering for one position, for the center position only, or are you rendering multiple, let's say for 10 users, are you rendering 10?
For the one position only. I have.
So it's not a multi-user system. It's a single-user system, but you have multiple viewers in the system. So yeah, okay, I got it.
So yeah,
okay. So you didn't solve the cave problem. Okay.
No, we haven't saved that. I have
Next
wanted to
step. Next step.
There is some experiments that I have wanted to do on that sort of the multi-user perspectives within a cave, where since we're using a tracking system, obviously you can, if I'm looking that way, I can have my own pair. If you're looking that way, you can have your own pair. And as you get closer, what I was wanting to experiment with was sort of trying to merge the perspectives together somehow. But since I'm not a researcher, it's not like you would know a lot more than I do about that. But it's something, if I had some time, I'd love to research that rather than just implementing some things at the moment. But
so there's like lots of open questions we could actually like collaborate with you guys, because we have like a small team who have limited capabilities, how much we can push some of the research sites. But if you're interested in collaborations, coming into Epicenter and working with us and working on our systems as well, you're very welcome to do so. So very open for that.
And most of us here being engineers, we don't spend much time sort of researching some of these sort of different things with the VR. We end up implementing a lot of projects for third-party researchers. So yeah, we would love to work a bit more with people researching this particular field rather than sort of visualization.
Thank you.